Hey, have you ever wanted to make Deltarune music with the worst sound font imaginable? No? Well, I'm going to teach you how to do that. And I'm going to recreate one of Toby Fox's best songs to date, which is Spawn. As you will soon see, this shit right here is not as easy as one might expect, because I could just simply choose the instruments that are here. But if I very quickly show you how they sound like, they do not sound good. With MIDI, you often have the trouble that everything sounds very shit, which you wouldn't usually have on sound fonts that actually sound good. So how is it possible that I have something like well, that's why we're recreating Spawn today. First of all, I'm going to open another instance of FL Studio here. For my reference, I'm going to use my remix of Spawn, and also this here. Don't mind this, I just used FL Studio 21. Something we can do is take our legally acquired version of Spawn the music, click on here for more options, and then select extract stems from sample. I already splitted the stems for Spawn, so I'm just going to transfer them over to today's project. And then once we have our instruments and we set it to the correct tempo, you're going to want to do is actually start your MIDI instruments. In FL Studio, you go into this tab here, select MIDI out, and then you create a new effect on the mixer, and you choose the plugin named Fruity LSD. Hook up the MIDI to the correct port. So these two numbers here have to align so that you can play the instrument. And then you're pretty much set up for MIDI action. MIDI action. One of the first things to actually make MIDI sound kind of okay is to focus on the drums. Usually, MIDI drums sound absolutely terrible no matter what preset you take. We will take the example of old NES games. The NES is a pretty cool sound chip because it can have drums that sound like, and also like. You can use noise and triangle waves to simulate the exact sounds that a drum would make. If we look at the sounds that MIDI come with, there is some saving graces, like the applause instrument. If you play it at high enough frequencies, it starts to sound like noise. And due to the way MIDI works, some instruments will not stop playing their sample up until they reach the end of the actual note, meaning that if we wanted to, we could change the volume of our instrument on the fly to make it sound like it's being triggered at different times, but we have the note itself playing this entire time. So we have something like... We can apply this exact same line of thinking with the bass drum and snare, and for that we're going to have to take one of these instruments right here. Now I'm going to pick piccolo, and I'm going to point to this part right here. You can see there's a little bit of a sine wave, and we can use that to our advantage in order to basically make our own drum samples from scratch. And for that I'm going to look at the actual sample. I'm going to see how the sample actually looks when it plays. And we're going to use this spectrogram to see. I'm going to start with the noise part. That's very easy. Usually the noise is like marked with this green sort of color. And then what you have afterwards is the actual drum sample. So I'm going to cut this here prematurely so that I can only have the Spawn also has like a tambourine sound playing alongside the drum. And this is something that you gotta watch out for. And you gotta try to get the cleanest sound possible. This is usual bass drum structure. You have like loud noise very shortly, followed by a sound sine wave sort of sound that decreases in pitch. So to try and recreate that, I'm going to have this and name it MIDI for bass drum, and use both of these channels to try and this triangle channel, and then I'm going to use the applause channel for this noise part. Use the cursor head changing in this place and also here to see approximately where it should get quiet. And then I'm going to change these events board for the try volume. So it'll be like here. So this is the peak. It stays a little bit, then gets quieter about here, and then it fades into nothing. And then what we can do is try to test how this sounds. And note that usually works for drums is just A4 or A3. So I'm going to choose that one. And for noise, it's usually something high like D8. So I'm going to try this first. And you can already hear that sounds pretty interesting. Obviously it doesn't sound like exactly what we're looking for, so I'm going to lower this so that the noise isn't as high. And the try, I'm going to lower it, and then I'm going to focus on the pitch part of it. And here's something very weird about MIDI. You can only go about 1200 cents, which is an octave down, or you can go up to 1200 cents. In my Dark Zone remix, instead of applying it only to drums, I also apply it to the little flute that plays. Something that was very annoying about it is that I couldn't just like choose the note of C and then do whatever pitch I wanted. I had to specifically choose G5 because the highest note that this instrument ever goes is like G6. So in order to have the trick work without having to like restart, so that's definitely something to keep in mind. Like I said, we're going to have a very sharp decline. Nice. Yeah, that sounds better. Yeah, I think my try note is too low, so maybe... Whoa, glacier jump scare? Yeah, you can hear that like it sounds better. If you're attentive, you may have noticed that our bass drum sound kind of changed over time there as it was playing. Remember how I said that this is like an instrument playing? You can see there that it has like a little moment where it starts to rise. And this is something that you gotta keep in mind. It's usually best to like leave the first 2 bars without playing sounds, so that you can have this drum sound always sounding consistent even from the start of the song. Now we have a bass drums, but obviously we also need a snare. We're going to keep using our try and NSE, because if we already have them, there's no reason to start new ones. And MIDI has like very weird sound limitations that makes it so that when you start playing more and more notes, some of them just cut off if you play too many at the same time and after a certain amount of time. So it's best to just like try to keep as many of these channels just playing without introducing new ones. Yeah, this part is just noise, and this part has like a little bit of sine wave, but it's mostly noise, it seems. I'm going to also mute that. Whoa, that sounds very strange. What happens if I keep it flat? Yeah, definitely gotta have that. Alright, we have some semblance of drums. So maybe we should try to recreate our little drum loop. Definitely doesn't sound familiar at all, but it sounds better than what we could have had with just normal drums. Like, we have the... But we instead have... A lot of this is trial and error. You just gotta try things out until it sounds good. With that done, I can just copy this from my other project we already have. Alright, one more NES trick. You can create delay if you do that. And after arranging the drums a little bit, now we have a fully functional drum loop. Now here's a very fun thing. How would you recreate this part? If you're attentive to the sound that it makes, a synth that sounds similar to this, what we're going to try to do is the exact same thing that we did with the bass drum. We're going to look at a singular note and try to see what it's comprised of. We're very lucky that I know that this exact drum synth is just like a bunch of saw waves. We're going to start with that. Create another sawtooth. Remember to change the channel because it's a different instrument. And we're going to change the pitch by a few cents. Like, we can keep going with this. And you can like do this out of basically every instrument. But I'm gonna like... Oh, that sounds pretty good actually. I probably can do echoes here. Yeah. Now you too can make Spawn, but it's an extremely good MIDI. Thanks